Patrick! Oh.
I'm really nervous.
What? We need some high quality stills.
Okay, good. Good. Very good.
What? Are you going to set or?
Alright, so my presentation is about Switzerland. And so over the last 10 or 15 years, I've been to quite a few different countries. And one of the things that has always struck me was that whenever I talk to somebody, almost everybody had something to say about Switzerland. Often true, often not. So one of the things that I hear the most is that Switzerland and Sweden are actually one and the same country. To be honest, it's probably just a confusion of names. You know, Sweden, Switzerland, Swiss, Swedish. However, they're definitely not the same countries. In fact, they're about 2,000 kilometers apart. Talking about geography. So where exactly is this little country I'm talking about? Turns out that it's smack in the center of Europe, right between Germany, Austria, Italy, and France. And if you look closely, you'll actually recognizing by looking for the pig shape. There you go. So, interestingly though, even though Switzerland is right in the center of Europe, it's not actually part of the European Union. And the reason for that actually brings us to another really, really interesting topic. So, see, in the early 1990s, when the EU was founded, the government actually wanted Switzerland to join the EU. However, that decision got overturned by the Swiss people. So you must wonder, what? You know, overturned by the people? What kind of government is that? So the reason this was possible is because the Swiss constitution defines a political system of direct democracy. What this means is basically everybody gets a chance, or everybody can challenge any decision that is made in parliament. Basically all you need to do is collect 50,000 signatures and submit what's called a referendum. What happens then is a national vote. So, and I would say we have about, so we probably vote on 3 or 4 different things every 2 to 3 months. So, which is quite interesting. So that's exactly what happened with the EU. In fact, what happened with the EU was even more interesting. It was actually a really close call. See, Switzerland has 26 cantons. And in order to win a vote, not only, so you need something which is called a double majority. So not only do you need a majority of votes, but you also need a majority of cantons supporting the proposal. So if you think about it, it's kind of unfair, right? Because it means basically that the guys living in big cantons where there's lots of people, their vote essentially counts much less than people living in small cantons. And I actually have a theory that because a lot of the small cantons are in rural and mountainous areas, there tends to be always a slightly conservative bias in Swiss elections and votes. So talking about cities and cantons, contrary to popular belief, the capital is actually neither Zurich nor Geneva, but Bern. So it's a bit like Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, except that Bern is actually quite nice. So, so which brings us to another myth. People, once and for all, cuckoo clocks are not Swiss. Right? Annoyingly, tourist shops will actually sell them to you, but that's pretty much just because, you know, tourists will buy them, not because they're Swiss. So you might wonder, so what, if not cuckoo clocks, does Switzerland actually produce? So if you ask a tourist, that's what you get. Cheese, chocolate, and watches. Which, you know, it's kind of true, but it's not the full picture. So, see, Switzerland is a really, really tiny country. It's got about 7 million people, the size of about a fifth of the state of Karnataka. But yet, its economy is one of the world's most competitive and strongest. And in fact, it's pretty hard to go anywhere in the world without stumbling across some, you know, Swiss brands or services or names. It's not all about economic output, though. Switzerland also has some you know, a lot of culture and research. There's great universities. Best of all, most education is free. Pretty much all education is free. And there's other research centers or institutions, like, for example, the CERN, where Tim Berners-Lee invented the web, or where more recently some crazy scientists tried to blow up the universe. In case you were wondering, you've probably all seen the move that happened recently from wikileaks.org to .ch after the US banned their domain name. So in case you were wondering, CH is actually the country code of Switzerland. And what it stands for is Latin for Helvetic Confederation. So Confederation is pretty clear, but what about Helvetic? Turns out that the name originally belonged to a Celtic tribe that used to occupy the area which is now known as Switzerland. And in case some of you are wondering if there's some connection with the font, you're absolutely right. So the font, Helvetica, was actually designed by some Swiss typeface designers about 50 years ago. And I think originally they actually wanted to call it Helvetia, which means Switzerland. But then they decided against it and just called it Helvetica, which essentially just translates to Swiss. Which brings us to our last myth. And our last myth is an interesting one, because it's actually a myth that is believed by most Swiss people. And it's about this chap called Wilhelm Tell, who's a medieval folk hero. And he was a champion with the crossbow. And basically he became a hero after he assassinated a tyrannic overseer of Habsburg Austria. And one of the key scenes that happened just before the assassination is when the Austrian asked Tell to shoot an apple off his son's head with the crossbow. So, and according to the legend, kind of Tell's defiance sparked the rebellion, which ultimately led to the creation of Switzerland. Unfortunately, the whole story is a lie. Tell never existed. But interestingly, actually 60% of all Swiss people still believe that Tell did exist. So there you go. Next time you see a Swiss person, you can actually tell them something about Switzerland they might not already know.